Long before the name Moscow echoed across history, the land where the city now stands was an untamed wilderness. Dense forests stretched as far as the eye could see, broken only by winding rivers and small meadows where wild animals roamed freely. The Moskva River, calm in some places and fierce in others, cut through the land like a silver thread, feeding the soil and shaping the lives of the few tribes who dared to settle nearby. These early settlers were Slavic tribes, people who had lived in harmony with the land for centuries. They built small wooden huts along the riverbanks, surviving through hunting, fishing, and farming. Their lives were hard, for winters were long and bitter, and summers were short yet full of labor. Still, they were bound together by tradition, folklore, and their reverence for the natural world around them. They believed the forests were home to spirits, the rivers protected by unseen guardians, and the skies watched over them with divine favor. Over time, these settlements grew into small communities where people would gather not only to share food, but also to share stories. Around the fire, they told legends of heroes and gods, of battles fought and victories won. Among these tales, whispers began of a destined place, a gathering ground where a great city would rise, uniting their scattered tribes. They did not yet know its name, but they believed the river itself had chosen the spot, promising prosperity to those who built upon its banks. Thus, the seeds of Moscow's origin were planted not with stone walls or mighty kings, but with humble people, their myths, and their enduring bond with the land. It was here, in the heart of the wilderness, that the story of Moscow truly began. As the tribes along the Moskva River grew in number, life demanded stronger organization. Hunters could no longer supply everyone alone, and farmers needed help defending their fields from raids. The people realized that safety and prosperity depended on unity. Thus, by the 12th century, a new settlement began to take shape on the high banks of the river. According to legend, the first fort was built in 1147, when Prince Yuri Dolgoruki, a ruler from the north, invited his ally to come to me, brother, to Moscow. At the time, it was little more than a clearing with wooden walls and watchtowers, but that invitation would mark the city's official birth. The fort, known as a Kremlin, stood proudly above the waters, serving both as a refuge and as a symbol of authority. Life within the early Moscow Kremlin was simple yet disciplined. Farmers tilled the soil outside the walls, while craftsmen and traders worked inside, supplying tools, clothing, and goods. Merchants from distant lands began to pass through, drawn by the river routes that connected Moscow to other Slavic towns. Gradually, Moscow's reputation spread as a safe stop for travelers, protected by sturdy walls and brave defenders. But it was not only trade and defense that gave Moscow importance. The settlement quickly became a center of faith. Wooden churches were erected, their bells calling villagers to prayer and reinforcing a sense of shared identity. Priests taught that the community's survival was blessed by divine will, and this belief strengthened their unity in times of hardship. Though small compared to neighboring cities, Moscow was now more than a cluster of huts. It was becoming a gathering place of power, faith, and culture. The humble dream of the tribes was beginning to take form. Brick by brick, prayer by prayer, Moscow's rise was never without struggle. As the small settlement grew, so too did the attention it attracted from enemies. The 13th century brought one of the darkest chapters in its early history, the Mongol invasion. Sweeping across the steppes like a storm, the armies of Batu Khan crushed cities and villages, demanding submission to the Golden Horde. Moscow, still young and fragile, could not escape their wrath. In 1238, the Mongols burned the settlement to the ground, leaving little behind but ash and sorrow. Yet, even in destruction, Moscow's people did not abandon their home. Survivors returned, rebuilding the Kremlin with determination, their faith unshaken. The river, once again, became their lifeline, providing food, trade, and the promise of renewal. For many decades after, Moscow lived under Mongol rule, forced to pay heavy tribute. Princes of Moscow walked a fine line, balancing loyalty to the horde with the protection of their people. Unlike some other towns that resisted and were destroyed, Moscow chose endurance. Its leaders used patience and cunning, quietly strengthening their defenses, fostering trade, and building alliances with nearby Slavic lands. Amid these struggles, Moscow also gained spiritual significance. In the 14th century, the Orthodox Church moved its seat to Moscow, transforming the city into a religious heart of Rus. Pilgrims came to worship, and with them came respect, wealth, and influence. The ringing of church bells began to symbolize not just prayer, but resilience. Thus, Moscow's trials under fire and foreign domination forged its character. Each invasion, each tribute, and each act of survival shaped the city into something greater than before. From ashes, it learned endurance. From faith, it drew strength. And from hardship, Moscow began to rise as a beacon of unity for all Rus. By the late 14th and 15th centuries, Moscow's patience and resilience began to bear fruit. Its princes, once vassals to the Golden Horde, slowly gathered power. Among them, Prince Dmitry Donskoy became a symbol of defiance. In 1380, he led Moscow's forces to victory at the Battle of Kulikovo, a moment celebrated as the first great step toward freedom from Mongol rule. Though the horde would return, Moscow's spirit could no longer be subdued. As generations passed, Moscow emerged as a unifying force among the divided Russian lands. While rival cities like Novgorod and Tver struggled to maintain independence, Moscow's rulers used diplomacy, marriage, and war to expand their influence. The city became known not just for its strong walls, but for its clever leaders who dreamed of a united Rus. This dream reached a turning point under Ivan III, often called Ivan the Great. In the late 15th century, he declared Moscow free from Mongol domination, refusing to pay tribute any longer. With boldness and strength, he expanded the city's territory, transforming Moscow from a regional stronghold into the heart of a growing state. Under his reign, the Kremlin was rebuilt in stone, with majestic towers and cathedrals rising against the sky. Italian architects were invited to design its walls, blending Russian tradition with Renaissance influence. The new Kremlin became both fortress and palace, symbolizing Moscow's role as the seat of power. By then, Moscow was no longer just a settlement by the river. It was the political and spiritual center of Rus, earning the title the Third Rome, a successor to both Rome and Constantinople. From this foundation, Moscow prepared to step fully into its destiny as the capital of a vast and enduring empire. As the centuries unfolded, Moscow's destiny became inseparable from the fate of Russia itself. The once humble fort by the Moskva River had grown into a city of golden domes and formidable walls, a place where power and faith converged. The stories of its origins, tribal huts, Mongol flames, and the steady rise of princes were carried forward as symbols of resilience and unity. By the 16th century, under Ivan IV, known as Ivan the Terrible, Moscow crowned its first Tsar. The coronation was not only a political act, but also a declaration that Moscow was the heart of a new empire. From its Kremlin, rulers extended authority across endless forests, steppes, and mountains, shaping the vast land that would come to be known as Russia. Moscow's role was more than political. It was cultural and spiritual as well. Churches with onion-shaped domes painted the skyline, their colors and forms unlike anything in Europe. Monks and scholars preserved traditions, while storytellers wove the city's struggles into epics of endurance. For ordinary people, Moscow was a beacon of hope, a place that had survived fire, invasion, and oppression, yet continued to rise. Even as new capitals like St. Petersburg emerged later, Moscow never lost its soul. It remained the city of memory and heart, where Russia's past could not be forgotten. In times of war and peace, of revolution and rebirth, Moscow stood as a reminder of what endurance and faith could achieve. Thus, the origins of Moscow are not merely tales of wood and stone, but of spirit and will. From a riverside settlement to the throne of Tsars, its journey speaks of resilience, a story written by its people, etched into its walls, and carried by the river that gave it life.